Okay, here I have the deck done. I have the waterways in place. I have the staining in place here, although I still have to do the jump the gun staining. I still have to do the tree nails in the deck. The black spots here are painted off where the hatches are going to go. But the next step on the hull is to do the copper plating. I've already started that here with some plates. One row halfway down the bottom, about halfway in the next row started. This is going to be really interesting to do. It's going to take a long time. But to do that, first thing you need is a way to make the copper plates themselves. So I followed the instructions in the book. In the manual they have instructions here, full section on how to make the jig for doing the copper plates. I use my scrap piece of wood that I use for doing the waterway. A couple pieces of wood down, more blocking in underneath here to set the distance and leave a little bit of gap for the plates to go under. The taller section just to have something to go through. Follow their directions on making a port and starboard stamp. These are actually backwards because this is showing what the pattern should look like. So port and starboard. This is the block of wood. Copy those things off, stuck on here, and put nails in there and sanded it straight so they're all at the same level. These are what I use for that. I'm trying to do it in such a way that you have a pattern of nails, and then on one end you just have three or four coming down. That makes the overlap. To make the plates, kit comes with some copper tape, essentially copper tape. Be careful once you peel this off the backing, it is sharp. And you're just going to slide that into your jig. If I can get it in there this time. And the way you're doing this is you have a line here that's going to go in between, just after the vertical line of plates. And then instructions say tap it with a hammer. I find just stick your stamp in, rock it a couple times, and it makes sufficient pattern. And you go to the next one, and just keep doing that. Then once you have a bunch, you're going to give them a cut so that you have a whole bunch of individual copper plates. And these copper plates are real fun to get in place. Because the first thing you have to do is get the paper backing off. And I find oftentimes if I just can catch it on the edge with the X-Acto knife, I can peel the copper away from the backing. What I've not found is a way to get it off without getting all sorts of wrinkles in it. Then you stick it in place, it's going to go on. Try to line it up with the one behind it. Don't rub with your fingers, you will hit it with your fingernail. Use like a piece of wood or something so it's softer. Roll it over onto the bottom. The bottom doesn't need coated because you're going to be gluing a piece of wood across there anyway. And like I said, this stuff is sharp. Make sure you don't cut yourself with it. I've cut myself a few times already. And there you have another one in place. So I'm going to go ahead and just keep doing this. Get the first few rows in place and then come back. At some point in time, the plans show that, if I grab them here really quick, the plans show right here, this row is sort of like a steeler where it just keeps getting thinner and thinner. Then there's another one here and another one farther forward towards the bow. So three of them look like they get narrower. And of course it's where the belly of the ship is, so I don't know how narrow they actually get here. So I'll have to cross that bridge when I get to it. In the meantime, it looks like I can go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows before I have to worry about that. So I'll get started on those and then come back. Okay, so I'm pretty much done with the copper plate on this side. I just have the belt line to go on right now. Cap, band, boot line, whatever you want to call it. I've also added on a piece of wood on the bottom. That is the sacrificial keel, I guess. And I've started the copper plate on the other side. Sorry for the glare on that. Copper is kind of shiny. Started doing the copper on the stem and stern to cap it off. No concerns. I'm getting a little where I can catch on it, but I think once I get this patinaed, however I'm going to patina, I haven't figured that out yet, and coated with a varnish, it'll be fine. So I'm going to continue on going on this side. I've already put one, for lack of a better term, a steeler line in here to allow the smooth curve coming up. On this side, just like adjust that a little bit, maybe if I can. No. I have the curve coming up where these eventually come up and end up at this belt line and trimmed off. To make this belt line, what I did actually is have I marked out where the top should be. I marked out where the bottom should be, minus a little bit because there's going to be a little overlap. I'm going to actually, the belt line's not actually coming to my upper mark, so I'm going to fudge that a little bit and get it so it looks nice. Then I put a piece of tape across here, and then I put the copper over the top of that tape so I get a nice line to cut to. So when you get on, so you need to cut tape on here, you put the copper over the top of it, you can just run your fingernail right along the edge, and then go back along with a X-Acto knife, cut the copper. When you peel the tape off, it takes that extra copper with it. So I'm going to get on, continuing on this side over here, and come back when I'm back up to the belt line on this side. Okay, I thought I'd revisit this again. On this side here, the starboard side, all the planks start curving like this, and they end up coming up to a line here. And there's a belt line that goes on top of that of copper plates to cap it off. What I did before that, I put a piece of tape across here where these fill copper plates come up to, not the cap rail, because there'll still be another section on top of this for the cap rail. I take the copper plates, I put them up onto here, let them flow onto the tape, run my fingernail right along this edge, and that's where I cut the copper plates off. And when I peel the tape off, all the copper plates come off. The ones where it's cut, you know what I mean. Everything that is waste gets taken off, and you're left with a nice edge, like on this side, that then you can come back later on and put your cap rail over the cap band, and this is going to go along this whole edge. So I'll go ahead and finish off this side with the filler plates and come back to it. So I've got this plate right here in place. You can see it comes over the blue tape, and I come over, I just mark it off with my fingernail where I want to cut it, and then just come with a knife and then just cut that off. And when I go ahead and take the blue tape off, that edge will come off as well with it. I'm just going to pick it off right now, but that edge will come off with it, and you'll be left with a nice straight line, hopefully at the right spot. Make sure you keep sighting along the length of it, from the side of it. Make sure this line is straight, that it's not dipping, going up or going down from where the water line theoretically would be. So I'll go ahead and get the rest of these on, come back, and we'll get this cut off and start working on the cap rail. So back here, I have the copper clad on both sides now, as well as the sacrificial keel. Looks pretty good. A little bit of trimming I can do here to get the curves flow a little better. But both sides are done. I'm not sure if I'm going to patina it or kind of leave it like this before I coat it with a polyurethane. But it's going to need it because you can feel how rough it is if you go backwards. So you need something just to seal it in. Next step now is to shape and install the rudder. This thing will get painted black. It'll get coated in copper, and it's going to have the hinges on here, the gudgeons and pins on here. But it does need to be shaped so that you're angled on the front, so that the rudder can turn side to side, and then it's going to be tapered towards the back to about probably half the thickness of the current wood. So I started here, shaping the front just with an X-Acto knife. It'll get sanded later. With a nice sharp X-Acto knife, you should just be able to shave off wood until you get to it. Or if you have a good carving knife, you can do the same thing. But it looks like it's about a 45-degree angle. Want to be careful because of the grain. Right there is starting to lift the grain. I don't want to lift the grain. I merely want to shave it down to a nice angle. Same thing on the very back here. So it'll be something like that down both sides. Make sure, if you're going to do it this way, make sure your knife is very sharp. With a really sharp knife, you can really control the angle of the, or the speed and depth of the blade, and how fast you go. Okay, I have the rudder shaped, and that literally took me about 3 to 5 minutes with a nice gouge and some sandpaper. I'm not going to worry about this char here because it's, quite frankly, it's going to be coated either by copper or by paint anyway. Up here I'll sand it a little bit more. But right now, I want to see about getting this hole drilled. So, I was going to do it with the drill, but I think I want more control, especially on depth. So I'll probably use a pin vise for that. So I just come into right here, get centered up. And it's 2 layers, so I just go through the first layer. This looks like it's fairly centered, so I'm going to go with the bigger drill. So then, looking centered, I can just come in and start carving this out. Okay, got my hole cut in here. It might need some fine tuning later. A little spot to touch up with the red. All the way through. You do the inside of that with black, the inside of the hole here with red. And the rudder fits through nicely and turns nicely. I did have a mistake here, that when I was sanding the rudder down, I ended up with a point at the top. I just went back and I put a piece of wood on either, just cut it flat on either side, put a piece of wood on it, glued them down, filed it to shape, and called it good. Okay, I've made one of the pencils. Yeah, pencils for the rudder. Piece of copper with a, or a piece of brass with a brass rod soldered onto it, and then coated in the copper foil to make it blend in, because it wouldn't be dissimilar metal. Took me a while to work out how I want to make them. So basically what I did, I started out with a piece of the copper strap, bent it around just above where we've mounted to get the shape. That way I can just get the same shape as the rudder. Take it off, take a look at it, make sure it's all lined up. Make sure you're not repeating what you already did, because this one here goes right here. The one I made goes right here, right? Goes right there, okay. So that's the third one down, second one down, right here. Okay, so it looks good. Make sure you bend it before you solder it. And I'm soldering it. The instructions say you can solder it, glue it, however you want to attach it. I found I kind of like to solder it in place. So I shape it, cut off the other side to match it roughly. I'll fine tune it later. And then I can take this stuff, this piece, and just sit in my little helping hands here. And let it just hang down here. So I have something to solder to. The kit does not come with this brass wire. I had some left over from another kit that I decided I'm going to use rather than the steel wire. Easier to solder and all that. And I'll dip it in just some flux here. Get the flux onto where I'm soldering, into the other half. What the flux does is it makes it so the solder flows better. I can go ahead, I can get my piece in here, and I can just adjust it so that it just fits right where I want it, right in the center here. Get this down a bit so you can see better. So now I'm just right here in the very center of this. You can see it sticks out past a little bit. I'll trim that off later. And now it's ready to solder. I just go in here and I just get a blob in here. There we go. That one's soldered on. First one goes on the top. Do the gap filling, I think. And of course, I'll probably glue my fingers to this. But if you haven't glued your fingers to your model, then you haven't been building a model. Stick it on there. Squeeze it a little bit. You get my pliers out with that. That do not have grip on it. I should glue that one on. Next one, I think it's one I already coated. So there we go. That rudder is pretty much done. Just got to paint this top stuff black. Everything else is good. Not overly thrilled with these things not being lined up, but oh well. To cover them with the copper plate, I just put a piece of copper over it, thin strip of copper over it. You know, narrowed it down, and just press it down either side of the piece of wood. And it'll be good enough. Also make sure the parts on the ship kind of match the angles. Like I said, this stuff up needs to be black. Tying the eye rings, piece of copper to give it some sort of plate look there. It'll get painted black anyway. And that's done. For the ship side, you take your metal here, shape it around to the length you want and around the stern of the ship, and then slide each one underneath the pins here, and then glue them onto the ship. So I'll get that done next. Obviously the top is going to be painted black, and the bottom three will be coated in the copper foil again. I'll get done with that and show you the end result, and once that is done, we will be done with this chapter. So there we are. The entire hull is coppered. Rudder's in place. Paint's been touched up everywhere it needs to be touched up. I even went through and stained this bottom board. This is the sacrificial board to be on the bottom of the ship so that this takes the damage rather than the rest of the keel. But with that, chapter whatever this is, chapter 8 is done. I now move on to chapter 9, which is going to be outside trim on the transom and along the bulwarks. So thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.